In the annals of the arcane, few names resonate with the chilling intrigue of Aleister Crowley. A self-proclaimed prophet, magician, and formidable intellect, his life was a meticulously constructed tapestry of esoteric pursuits, veiled rituals, and an audacious challenge to societal norms. For decades, the public knew him as the wickedest man in the world, a moniker he not only tolerated but embraced. Yet, beneath the sensational headlines and the cultivated notoriety lay a labyrinthine journey into the strange, the unexplained, and the profoundly unsettling. We delve now into the shadowed history of a man who dared to walk the line between realms, to commune with entities unseen, and to leave behind a legacy that continues to stir debate, inspire fear, and invite the most bizarre theories. What forces did he truly unleash, and what echoes of his magic persist in our world today? This video seeks to uncover the threads of his paranormal life, examining each claim with a neutral lens, allowing the mystery to unfold. Edward Alexander Crowley began his life on October 12, 1875, in Royal Leamington Spa, England. His early years were steeped in the austere doctrines of the Exclusive Brethren, a fundamentalist Christian sect. His father, Edward Crowley, a retired brewer turned evangelical preacher, instilled a rigid moral code and biblical literalism that would profoundly clash with young Aleister's burgeoning intellect. From an early age, Crowley displayed a rebellious spirit, finding the teachings stifling and hypocritical. By adolescence, he actively sought to subvert the strictures of his upbringing. His mother, Emily Bertha Bishop, reportedly referred to him as the Beast, a term he would famously adopt as the Beast 666, drawing from the Book of Revelation, transforming a familial slur into a defined public persona. In 1895, Crowley entered Trinity College, Cambridge, ostensibly to study natural sciences. However, his academic pursuits were quickly overshadowed by his burgeoning interests in poetry, mountaineering, and, critically, the esoteric. By 1898, he abandoned his degree, inheriting a substantial fortune that granted him the freedom to pursue his unconventional passions without constraint. It was in this period that Crowley's engagement with the paranormal truly began. In 1898, he joined the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, a prominent occult organization founded in London a decade prior. This order was a driving force in the late 19th century Western esoteric revival, offering a structured system of ceremonial magic drawn from traditions like Hermetic Kabbalah, astrology, tarot, and Enochian magic. Figures such as Samuel Liddell MacGregor Mathers and William Butler Yeats became early influences and eventually rivals in his magical journey. Within the Golden Dawn, Crowley rapidly advanced through the Order's graded system, immersing himself in ritual magic. He adopted the magical motto, "Perdurabo," meaning "I shall endure." His experiences exposed him to formalized magical practices, including the invocation of deities and the pursuit of mystical knowledge through elaborate ceremonies. Accounts from this period, largely from Crowley himself, describe intense experiences during these rituals. He claimed to perceive and interact with non-physical entities. A pivotal moment in Crowley's occult career, one that would redefine modern Western esotericism, transpired in 1904. While on his honeymoon in Cairo, Egypt, with his first wife, Rose Edith Kelly, Crowley reported a series of mystical experiences that would form the bedrock of his new religious philosophy, Thelema. According to Crowley, Rose began to enter trance states, uttering cryptic messages she attributed to an entity associated with the god Horus. Initially dismissive, Crowley eventually yielded to Rose's insistence, agreeing to perform a ritual invocation of Horus. Over 3 consecutive days, commencing April 8, 1904, Crowley claimed to receive a dictated text from a preternatural entity identifying itself as Aiwass. Crowley would later refer to Aiwass as his holy guardian angel. This text, titled Liber Alvel Legis, or the Book of the Law, became the central sacred scripture of Thelema. Crowley asserted that the dictation occurred through automatic writing, a process where the writer's hand moves seemingly independently, guided by an external unseen force. Each of the 3 chapters of the book was allegedly dictated with precise timing, beginning at noon on April 8th, 9th, and 10th. The core message of the Book of the Law proclaimed the dawning of a new aeon of horrors, which would succeed the previous aeons of Isis and Osiris. This new age, according to the text, would be governed by a supreme moral law. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. This declaration, frequently misinterpreted as a call for hedonistic abandon, was intended by Crowley to signify the discovery and dedicated pursuit of one's true will, an individual's unique, divine purpose, aligned with the fundamental order of the universe. The book itself contains passages that are deeply symbolic, enigmatic, and open to multiple interpretations, replete with numerical codes and allusions to ancient Egyptian mythology. The circumstances surrounding the reception of the Book of the Law are central to the paranormal claims associated with Crowley. Adherents of Thelema regard it as a genuinely channeled text, a direct communication from a preternatural intelligence. They emphasize the philosophical depth and internal coherence of the work, arguing that it transcended Crowley's conscious capabilities at that point in his life. Specific details, such as the exact timing of the dictation and the references to a particular museum artifact, the Stele of Ankhefen Kansu, which bore the number 666, a figure profoundly significant to Crowley, are cited as evidence of its otherworldly origin. Conversely, skeptics interpret the Book of the Law as a product of Crowley's subconscious mind, his formidable literary talents, or even a deliberate fabrication. They suggest that automatic writing can be a manifestation of psychological processes. The content, they argue, could have been shaped by Crowley's extensive reading in occult and mythological texts, combined with his own creative and philosophical inclinations. The precise timing and specific details from this perspective might be attributed to coincidence, confirmation bias, or even a staged event meticulously designed to imbue his new philosophy with an aura of divine authority. It is also argued that Crowley, despite his claims of initial disinterest or resistance to the text, consciously shaped its interpretation and dissemination over time to suit his evolving vision. Following the momentous reception of the Book of the Law, Crowley established his own magical order, the AA, Argentium Astrum or Silver Star, in 1907 with his associate George Cecil Jones. This order was conceived as a primary vehicle for the promulgation of Thelema and to provide a systematic framework for magical and spiritual attainment. Building upon the foundational principles of the Golden Dawn, the AA integrated the newly revealed tenets of the Book of the Law. The practices emphasized by the AA included yoga, meditation, Hermetic Kabbalah, and various forms of ceremonial magic. All were designed to assist individuals in discovering and manifesting their true will. Throughout his life, Crowley meticulously documented a wide array of his magical workings in extensive diaries and published volumes, such as Magic in Theory and Practice. He described elaborate preparations, specific magical tools, intricate incantations, and vivid visualizations, all designed to present himself as a master of these esoteric arts. These records are replete with claims of encounters with spiritual entities, vivid visions, and the manifestation of magical effects. While Crowley's canonical rituals are well known, some of his lesser documented workings descend into even stranger territory. Beyond his more famous magical workings, Crowley embarked on several obscure yet intensely bizarre esoteric experiments, further illustrating the depth of his magical explorations. One of the most dramatic and widely discussed of these occurred in December 1909, in the stark, desolate Algerian desert. Crowley and his devoted disciple Victor Neuburg undertook an Enochian ritual to invoke the entity Choronzon, a being described in occult tradition as the demon of dispersion, or the formidable dweller in the abyss. According to Crowley's meticulously recorded account, the ritual was conducted within a specially consecrated temple tent. Newberg, acting as the designated scryer or medium, positioned himself within a protective triangle. Crowley conducted the invocation from outside this magical barrier. Crowley's diary entries paint a terrifying picture of the confrontation. He asserted that Choronzon sprang from the containment triangle, somehow taking on a physical form and launching a violent attack on Newberg. Crowley wrote of Newberg wrestling with a wild, naked savage, describing a genuine physical and spiritual battle with what he believed to be a real demon. Newberg reportedly fended off the entity with a dagger, desperately invoking divine names. The ordeal, according to Crowley, lasted over 2 grueling hours. It concluded only when Crowley declared the demon defeated by inscribing the name of the Thelemic goddess Babylon in the sand. Intricately, Crowley also claimed that at certain points during the battle he had identified himself with Choronzon, suggesting he served as a medium for the entity's manifestation. This bizarre desert confrontation has achieved legendary status within occult circles. Believers in Crowley's magic, including Newberg himself, who remained convinced of its authenticity throughout his life, regard this as a successful, albeit extraordinarily dangerous encounter with a genuine supernatural entity. They point to Crowley's detailed documentation and the reported physical struggle as compelling evidence of a tangible demonic manifestation. Skeptics conversely offer more grounded explanations, suggesting the events may have been the result of drug-induced hallucinations, an intense psychodrama, or even a fabricated narrative designed to enhance Crowley's reputation. The fact that portions of Crowley's original diary entries from this event are missing has also fueled skeptical interpretations. Regardless of how one interprets the events, the Choronzon ritual stands out as an intensely bizarre episode, vividly illustrating the extreme lengths to which Crowley was willing to go in his magical explorations. While residing in New York City during the tumultuous years of World War I, Crowley embarked on another peculiar occult experiment known as the Amalantra working. This involved a series of sex magic rituals performed with his then Scarlet Woman, Roddy Minor. The stated objective of these rituals was to open an interdimensional channel, facilitating contact with non-human intelligences. Crowley claimed that he and Minor entered profound trance states during these workings. He made direct contact with an entity he named Lamb. From this alleged encounter, Crowley produced a striking portrait of Lamb. It depicted a humanoid figure with an oversized, bulbous head, large, dark, and haunting eyes, and a notably slight body. The drawing of Lamb is particularly uncanny. Decades after Crowley sketched that distinctive egg-headed figure, the popular image of grey aliens, characterized by large, bald heads and slight bodies, emerged prominently in UFO contactee stories and mainstream science fiction. At the time of the working, Crowley did not explicitly refer to Lamb as an alien, but he consistently presented it as a discarnate intelligence he had encountered beyond the veil. This portrait of Lamb is now famous within occult circles, widely regarded as perhaps the first depiction of a grey-like entity in the Western world, predating the modern UFO era by several decades. Crowley initially introduced the Lamb image in commentary to a theosophical text without extensive explanation, which only added to its mysterious nature. Later, his protege Kenneth Grant, who inherited the original drawing in 1945, would significantly elaborate on the theory. Grant suggested that Crowley's rituals had literally created a portal through which extra-dimensional beings could enter our world. Believers in Crowley's magic regard the Amalantra working as a serious and successful attempt at otherworldly communication. They cite the distinct coherence of the Lamb portrait and the specificity of Crowley's visions as evidence of genuine channeling. Skeptics, conversely, argue that such visions were more likely the products of autosuggestion, an active creative imagination, or drug use, as Crowley was known to experiment with substances like opium during these periods. From this perspective, Lamb could be interpreted as a figure emerging from Crowley's subconscious rather than an objective, external entity. Regardless of the interpretation, the Lamb episode adds a deeply bizarre chapter to Crowley's story. It blurs the lines between occult ritual and what many now interpret as an early alien encounter. Beyond these more intense experiments, Crowley also pursued less dangerous, though still unusual, magical endeavors. Among them were the Rites of Eleusis in 1910, a series of 7 public rituals or artistic magical plays staged in London. During these performances, Crowley and his associates invoked classical deities through a blend of poetry, music, and the burning of incense. His aim was to induce trance or mystical ecstasy in the audience. Some reports from the time claimed that attendees experienced hallucinations or strange sensations during the performances, prompting speculative press reports that Crowley might have infused the incense with narcotics, though no proof of such actions was ever found. Crowley's stated intention for the rites was to inspire the audience with religious ecstasy and to deliberately push the boundaries between theatrical performance and actual magic. This unique blend of art and occult ritual was highly unconventional for its time. It contributed significantly to Crowley's public image as an innovator of bizarre ceremonial experiences. Another significant, though less detailed, operation was the Paris working in 1914, an occult retreat Crowley undertook with Victor Neuburg. During this period, they engaged in intensive Enochian and sex-magical ceremonies. Details are sparse, largely surviving only in Crowley's cryptic diary entries, but it is known that they attempted to invoke elemental and planetary spirits. Accounts suggest that the sessions grew so intense and transgressive, involving elements of symbolic blood sacrifice and a dominant submissive dynamic between Crowley and Neuburg. Their magical partnership and personal relationship ultimately collapsed soon afterward. The Paris working is frequently cited by biographers as a prime example of Crowley pushing the boundaries, not only of sexual expression but also of psychological endurance in the pursuit of magic. Neuburg, who had been one of Crowley's most devoted disciples, was reportedly left physically and emotionally scarred by the experience, an outcome which Crowley in retrospect seemed to regard as a necessary ordeal for advanced magical attainment. Aleister Crowley left behind a legacy shrouded in paranormal claims, many of which stem from 2 pivotal residences, Boleskine House and the Abbey of Thelema. These locations, intended as epicenters for his magical work, became fertile ground for unsettling occurrences and public controversies, blurring the lines between the mundane and the supernatural. Crowley's journey into the deeper realms of magic began at Boleskine House, a secluded property he purchased in 1899 on the remote shores of Loch Ness in Scotland. His express purpose for acquiring Boleskine was to create an isolated sanctuary for the arduous, 6-month-long ritual of the sacred magic of Abramelin the Mage. This intricate operation aimed to achieve communion with one's holy guardian angel and, more controversially, to summon and bind the 12 kings and dukes of hell to the magician's will. Almost immediately, Boleskine House became a hotbed of strange phenomena. Crowley himself, along with his associates, reported phantom footsteps, sudden cold spots, unexplained movement of objects, and fleeting apparitions. Crowley attributed these disturbances to his magical workings, specifically claiming that he had failed to properly banish the powerful entities he had invoked, leaving a pervasive and unsettling presence. Local lore and later commentators fueled these claims with stories of misfortunes, accidents, illnesses, and tragedies befalling those connected to the house or Crowley's work there, such as the lodge keeper Hugh Gillies, who reportedly suffered a string of personal losses attributed to unleashed magical energies. Skeptics, however, largely dismissed these accounts as anecdotal, coincidental, or products of suggestion and local folklore, arguing that Crowley's carefully cultivated reputation as a black magician, combined with the house's isolated location, provided a ripe environment for the amplification or outright fabrication of sensational tales. Psychological explanations suggest that the isolated setting and pre-existing beliefs of those involved could have led to altered perceptions or a supernatural interpretation of ordinary events. The narrative of Crowley's extreme magical experimentation and its purported consequences continued and intensified with the establishment of the Abbey of Thelema in Cefalù, Sicily, in 1920. This communal dwelling was conceived as a dedicated magical commune where followers could immerse themselves in the principles of Thelema under Crowley's direct tutelage. The abbey quickly gained a reputation as a crucible for intense rituals often involving sex magic, significant drug use, and challenging ascetic practices designed to dismantle conventional psychological barriers. The most notorious paranormal claim directly linked to the abbey revolves around the tragic death of Raoul Loveday, a young Oxford student and devotee in 1923. While the official cause of death was acute enteritis, Loveday's wife Betty May launched sensational accusations in the British press. She alleged that Crowley had poisoned her husband through forced participation in depraved rituals, including the supposed consumption of a sacrificed cat's blood and other noxious substances. May's highly publicized accounts, which led to Crowley being infamously dubbed the wickedest man in the world, directly resulted in his expulsion from Italy by Benito Mussolini's government later that year. From a paranormal viewpoint, Loveday's death is seen by some as a direct, tragic outcome of dangerous magical practices, or as compelling evidence of malevolent forces unleashed by Crowley's rituals, suggesting that the ceremonies at the abbey were genuinely hazardous. Betty May's narrative, though sensationalized, significantly contributed to this chilling perception. Conversely, skeptical analyses attribute Loveday's death to the dire living conditions, unsanitary practices, and Crowley's unconventional experimental lifestyle at the commune. Accounts suggest the abbey was poorly maintained, the diet inadequate, and Loveday was reportedly in poor health prior to his arrival. The sacrificed cat's blood story is widely considered an embellishment by May, designed to shock and discredit Crowley. Medical explanations point to a severe gastrointestinal infection in an unsanitary environment lacking proper medical care, emphasizing that no legal proof or formal charges of murder were ever brought against Crowley. Thus, both Boleskine House and the Abbey of Thelema stand as enduring testaments to Aleister Crowley's controversial pursuit of magical enlightenment, locations where the reported paranormal intertwined with human psychology, public perception, and the dramatic narratives of those caught in his orbit. Crowley's paranormal legacy did not conclude with his death. In fact, some of the places and ideas inextricably linked to him continue to generate strange claims and modern legends to this very day. A prime example is Boleskine House, his former estate purchased in 1899 on the remote shores of Loch Ness in Scotland, which persistently remains a focal point of contemporary legends and paranormal speculation. Ever since Crowley's residency there, from 1899 to 1913, Boleskine House has been persistently rumoured to be deeply haunted or cursed. Crowley's abortive attempt at the Abramelin ritual, intended to summon immensely powerful forces without fully banishing them upon his departure, is frequently blamed for stirring up restless entities and leaving a lasting malevolent imprint. Visitors and caretakers over the years have reported a litany of classic paranormal phenomena: invisible intrusions echoing through empty rooms, sudden and dramatic cold spots, objects moving seemingly on their own, and fleeting apparitions glimpsed on the ground. Even rock star Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin, who acquired Boleskine in the 1970s due to his profound fascination with Crowley's work, publicly spoke of an oppressive atmosphere pervading the property. Page's house caretaker at the time, Malcolm Dent, allegedly experienced doors slamming by themselves, disembodied strange voices, and a peculiar chilling sense of presence that rendered certain rooms unbearable to enter, especially at night. While these reports remain anecdotal, they have undeniably cemented Boleskine's reputation as one of the United Kingdom's most notorious paranormal hotspots. Some of the darker legends surrounding Boleskine actually predate Crowley's arrival, yet have become intricately entwined with his story. Local folklore speaks of an 18th century Presbyterian minister, Thomas Houston, who was reputedly forced to battle a rogue wizard by returning the dead to their graves in the nearby kirkyard, suggesting the area was already steeped in supernatural tales long before the beast made it his home. During Crowley's residence, a number of macabre incidents were reported in the vicinity. For example, Crowley himself wrote that a workman at the house inexplicably went mad, and a housemaid attempted to leave in sheer terror due to the disturbing forces he claimed to have unleashed. Most chillingly, Crowley claimed he might have indirectly caused a local butcher's violent death. The man severed an artery and bled out after Crowley had inscribed demonic names on a bill from his shop, a coincidence Crowley framed as a case of curse by proxy. Such stories are inherently impossible to verify, yet they have become an integral part of Boleskine's haunted history, whispered down through generations of local lore. Even Jimmy Page noted that the house seemed to retain a sulphurous stench of evil and spoke of a headless man haunting the corridors, stating in a 1975 interview, "A man was beheaded there, and sometimes you can hear his head rolling down the hallway." He added that, after Crowley's era, there were suicides and people taken to asylums, as if the house harbored a lingering malevolent influence. It is undeniably challenging to disentangle verifiable fact from embellished fiction in these tales, but they undeniably amplify Boleskine's eerie aura. In the 21st century, Boleskine House tragically suffered two major fires, one in 2015 and another in 2019, which gutted much of the historic building. Perhaps inevitably, these devastating blazes have themselves been absorbed into the pervasive curse lore, with some speculating that the fires were not mere accidents but a direct manifestation of the unsettled forces irrevocably tied to the property. In the aftermath of these destructive events, paranormal investigators and curious visitors continue to flock to the ruins. Reports persist of ghostly lights, shadowy figures, and disembodied voices lingering around the site, even in its ruined state. The land's deep history, from ancient graveyard to Crowley's portal opening rituals to modern tragedies, leads some to passionately claim that the veil between the physical and spiritual worlds is thin at Boleskine. On the other hand, skeptics point out that old houses, particularly those with such notorious owners, inherently tend to attract legends. Confirmation bias can easily lead individuals to interpret every creak and shadow in the burned shell of Boleskine as evidence of a haunting. Nonetheless, local guides and ghost hunters continue to treat the site as actively haunted. A charitable trust has recently begun the ambitious task of restoring Boleskine House, perhaps with the eventual goal of opening it to the public, an intriguing development that may ultimately test whether the house's dark reputation can endure even when it is no longer in ruins. Crowley's presence still looms large in the paranormal world. From the desolate shores of Loch Ness to bustling internet forums, he is as much a supernatural figure as a purely historical one. Occult groups adhering to Thelema still conduct his rituals. Some practitioners claim to experience similar paranormal effects, such as vivid visions or even poltergeist-like activity during Crowley-inspired invocations of deities or demons. These are typically personal testimonies documented in contemporary occult literature. Even in pop culture, Crowley's legacy endures, appearing whenever someone delves into the curses associated with rock bands, haunted houses, or secret societies. His image as a master sorcerer means that any unexplained phenomenon can be, and often is, linked back to him by imaginative storytellers. Including some of these contemporary tales, particularly the Boleskine House hauntings, vividly illustrates how Crowley's mythos continues to evolve, constantly intertwining with modern legends and keeping his name firmly in the realm of the mysteriously unexplained. One particularly bizarre and fascinating avenue for expanding Crowley's extended paranormal history is the curious connection drawn between his occult work and the emergence of UFO lore and conspiracy theories. In recent decades, various authors and esoteric researchers have proposed compelling parallels between Crowley's magical experiments and the subsequent development of extraterrestrial mythology, a crossover that, while reading like science fiction, is taken quite seriously by some. As previously explored, Crowley's 1918 Lamb encounter bears an odd and striking resemblance to later alien abduction narratives. This portrait of Lamb, depicting a humanoid figure with an oversized, bulbous head, large, dark and haunting eyes, and a notably slight body, is now famous within occult circles. Decades after Crowley sketched this distinctive figure, the popular image of grey aliens, characterized by large, bald heads and slight bodies, emerged prominently in UFO contactee stories and mainstream science fiction. Occult writers like Kenneth Grant, a devoted Thelemite and fringe ufologist, have speculated that Crowley's rituals might have genuinely contacted an extraterrestrial or interdimensional being. This suggests he effectively prefigured the entire UFO phenomenon. Grant theorized that Crowley's Amalantra working opened a portal through which Lamb and potentially other alien-like entities entered our world. While this idea might sound far-fetched, it deeply fascinates those at the intersection of ufology and the occult. They point to the peculiar timing. Crowley's Lamb contact in 1918 was one of the first modern claims of communication with a non-human intelligence that possessed such a strikingly similar appearance to later alien archetypes. He didn't describe flying saucers, but the entity itself uncannily resembles those that would become ubiquitous in UFO sightings. In a sense, Crowley's magic circle in New York could be interpreted as an early close encounter of the fifth kind, a human-initiated contact with an alien intelligence. Of course, alternative explanations abound. Psychologists would argue that Lamb was a product of Crowley's unconscious mind or archetypal imagination. Nonetheless, the parallel remains a curious and deeply weird footnote in paranormal history. Even some respected UFO researchers have taken note. For example, the US paranormal investigator John Keel once quipped about Crowley possibly being a forerunner of modern contactees. More recently, Nick Redfern reported on a secret government think tank, the Collins Elite, that supposedly speculated Crowley's occultism opened a door to demonic aliens. While such claims are inherently unprovable, they undeniably enrich the narrative. Perhaps even more striking is Crowley's indirect link to a famous piece of UFO history, the Great Flying Saucer Wave of 1947. In early 1946, Jack Parsons, a brilliant rocket engineer and devoted follower of Crowley, performed a series of dramatic rituals known as the Babylon Working in the California desert. Parsons, together with L. Ron Hubbard, who would later become the controversial founder of Scientology, but was then an occult enthusiast, sought to incarnate a cosmic feminine force, Babylon. Crowley had prophesied her arrival years earlier in his novel Moonchild. By Parsons' own account, these rituals were a direct continuation of Crowley's work. The eerie twist is that very shortly after the Babylon Working concluded, the modern UFO era spectacularly began. In June 1947, pilot Kenneth Arnold's famous sighting of flying discs over Washington state occurred, followed by the iconic Roswell incident in July. Kenneth Grant prominently pointed out this peculiar coincidence, suggesting that Parsons opened a door and something flew in. In Grant's view, Parsons' rituals might have significantly widened a cosmic portal first tapped by Crowley. This could have inadvertently allowed unknown entities or energies to flood into our world. This notion that a dark magical ceremony in 1946 could trigger a global wave of UFO sightings reads like pure conspiracy science fiction, yet it has gained traction in certain occult and conspiracy circles. For example, Parsons himself later mused that the Babylon Working set loose things that he and Hubbard struggled to control. Skeptics understandably argue that this is merely a chronological coincidence, but as an occult conspiracy theory, the idea that magicians caused the UFO era is irresistibly bizarre. It deeply ties Crowley's legacy to one of the great modern mysteries. A fascinating side note is the involvement of L. Ron Hubbard. Before founding Scientology, Hubbard was briefly an acolyte of Crowley's student Jack Parsons. He participated enthusiastically in the 1946 Babylon working, acting as a crucial sidekick in the rituals. Crowley, upon hearing of this, was reportedly deeply skeptical and worried that Parsons was being fundamentally duped by Hubbard, whom Crowley derisively referred to as a con man. Ironically, Hubbard went on to create Scientology. This religion, beneath its surface-level self-help facade, contains an elaborate cosmology of ancient extraterrestrial beings and intergalactic empires. This is revealed in Hubbard's secret OT3 teachings about Xenu and other galactic overlords. It's as if Hubbard made a sharp, unexpected turn from summoning goddesses with Parsons to crafting a sci-fi spiritual narrative. Yet the transition is not as far-fetched as it sounds. Hubbard's experiences with Thelema and Crowley's magic may very well have influenced his thinking. He once even publicly acknowledged Crowley in a lecture as my very good friend, despite never having met him. While Scientology is not typically linked with Crowley in mainstream discussions, the overlap is a juicy detail for paranormal historians. It vividly demonstrates how Crowley's magical family tree connects to disparate movements, in this case leading directly into the heart of UFO modern religion. Following Crowley's death, some of his prominent successors explicitly fused UFO mythology with Crowley's magic. Kenneth Grant, for instance, founded the Typhonian OTO, deeply infusing Crowley's system with the cosmic horror fiction of H.P. Lovecraft and undeniable extraterrestrial themes. Grant claimed to detect an actual alien transmission from the star Sirius. He wrote extensively about magical methods to communicate with Lam and other otherworldly beings. He even published the Lam Statement, providing precise instructions for devotees to meditate on Crowley's Lam image as a literal gateway, essentially treating it as a sigil to enter the egg and directly meet the entity. Intriguingly, Grant noted that this practice was about willed contact with aliens. He directly compared it to what UFO researchers call CE5, the deliberate human initiation of contact with extraterrestrial intelligences. All of this was unfolding in the 1970s precisely as popular culture was burgeoning with intense UFO interest, which Grant interpreted as profound validation of his theories. Meanwhile, in the United States, other occultists picked up on these ideas. Researchers like James Moseley and rocket engineer Jack Parsons both speculated in the 1950s that beings from other dimensions might be visiting Earth. Parsons even wrote that aliens could simply be angels or demons in modern guise. More recently, a subset of conspiracy theorists suggest that government agencies might have secretly explored Crowley-style occult rituals in highly classified projects like MKUltra or remote viewing programs. They attempted to contact or even summon non-human intelligences as a kind of paranormal black operation. There is scant verifiable evidence for these claims, but they undeniably thrive on the internet. By mentioning some of these conspiracy theories, a sensational layer is added to the narrative. Crowley not only communed with demons, but perhaps inadvertently inspired a view of aliens as modern demons. It is a strange synergy of occult and UFO lore that vividly shows how Crowley's legacy continues to mutate in unexpected and often disturbing ways. Rounding out our exploration of Crowley's paranormal life, we turn to some of the more colourful anecdotes and urban legends that have persistently swirled around him and his followers. These stories, whether verifiable, wildly exaggerated, or purely mythical, powerfully illustrate how Crowley's provocative persona naturally lent itself to fantastical and often terrifying tales. A truly bizarre legend, persistent in the local folklore around Boleskine House, holds that Crowley might have been inadvertently responsible for the Loch Ness Monster's notoriety. The story suggests that during Crowley's intense rituals at Boleskine House, he either summoned or inadvertently unleashed a particularly powerful demon. This entity, according to the legend, subsequently took up residence in Loch Ness itself, thereby spawning the long-standing legend of the gigantic monster lurking in the dark waters. In other words, by this account, Nessie is not a plesiosaur or an optical illusion, but a Crowley-conjured demon in aquatic disguise. This specific rumor appears to have originated decades after Crowley's death, likely as locals and writers attempted to connect every strange phenomenon in the area back to the infamous occultist. While mainstream cryptozoologists do not endorse this idea, they typically seek biological or hoax-based explanations for the monster. It has undeniably become a popular piece of occult trivia. Documentaries and articles occasionally reference it for dramatic flair. For example, one short film titled Aleister Crowley and the Other Loch Ness Monster explores the notion that Crowley's rituals worked in a way he had not foreseen, possibly giving birth to the monster myth. Skeptics predictably chuckle at this fantastical notion, but, interestingly, Loch Ness did experience a notable spike in monster sightings in the 1930s, shortly after Crowley's time there, which is just enough for conspiracy-minded individuals to raise an eyebrow. Whether one views it as a tongue-in-cheek legend or a serious hypothesis, it is a perfect example of how Crowley's name continues to be attached to the most outrageous and unexplained phenomena. Many of Crowley's acquaintances and biographers have noted that strange misfortunes and calamities frequently befell people who crossed him, fueling persistent whispers that he could or did curse his enemies. Beyond Betty May's direct accusation that Crowley's rituals led to Raoul Loveday's death, there are several other notable instances. Crowley's longtime magical rival, S.L. MacGregor Mathers, the formidable head of the Golden Dawn, died in 1918 during the devastating Spanish flu epidemic. Crowley, never one to shy away from theatrical pronouncements, subtly hinted that Mathers' death might have been the result of certain rituals, implying that Crowley himself had taken astral revenge. There is no verifiable evidence of this beyond Crowley's dark humor and self-aggrandizement, but such hints undoubtedly cemented his reputation as someone who could inflict harm at a distance. In a highly publicized 1920s court case, Crowley was formally accused by a former disciple of using black magic to deliberately ruin lives. While the court understandably did not take these fantastical claims seriously, the sensationalist press eagerly seized upon them, portraying Crowley as literally hexing those who dared to cross him. Crowley, for his part, often actively encouraged this mystique. For example, he once wrote, "I have never killed anyone, but I have read obituaries with delight," deliberately allowing people to believe he had cast death spells. As noted earlier, Crowley himself claimed that by merely writing demonic names on a piece of paper, he caused a local butcher to fatally injure himself. In another bizarre anecdote, during World War II, Crowley took personal credit for hexing the Nazi leader Rudolf Hess. Hess's solo flight to Scotland in 1941, which famously led to his capture, was indeed a profoundly strange and unexplained event. Crowley coyly suggested that a ritual of his helped nudge Hess into that ill-fated mission. These stories are inherently impossible to prove, relying solely on Crowley's own words or anecdotal accounts, but they undeniably contributed to his legendary aura of malevolence and supernatural power. Crowley famously boasted that he could achieve literal invisibility, not by physically vanishing, but by employing magical means to profoundly cloud other people's perceptions of him. An earlier instance in Mexico City was followed by a more famous episode in London. Crowley reportedly told his friends that he would demonstrate his invisibility powers at the luxurious Café Royal by walking through the bustling restaurant in a flamboyant outfit. Sure enough, he strolled through the crowded establishment dressed in a Chinese robe and a fez hat and claimed that no one stopped him or reacted in any way. Crowley triumphantly declared it a complete success of occultism. His cloud of invisibility spell had worked. Observers later pointed out that London high society was often accustomed to eccentrics and likely simply ignored the oddly dressed man out of discretion or bemusement. Nonetheless, Crowley took it as a point of immense pride that he could conceal his presence at will. This humorous anecdote reveals the inherent showman side of Crowley's complex character. It serves as a reminder that not everything about him was deadly serious, dark magic. Sometimes he was quite simply performing what amounted to a theatrical prank or a fascinating social experiment. Those who knew Crowley intimately or followed his teachings also generated plenty of wild and often strange stories. Kenneth Grant, whom we've mentioned for his fascinating UFO connections, also alleged that Crowley was in regular contact with mysterious Himalayan masters and other hidden adepts. Grant wrote that after Crowley's death, he would occasionally sense his old master's presence during his own rituals, as if Crowley were guiding him from beyond the grave. Such anecdotes blur the line between genuine paranormal experience and devoted hallucination, but they powerfully demonstrate the almost cult-like reverence some disciples held for Crowley to the point of attributing ghostly mentorship to him. In the countercultural explosion of the 1960s, Crowley's legend experienced a significant revival. Hippie occultists in San Francisco spread a completely false legend that Crowley had sacrificed 150 children in black magic rituals, a grotesque distortion of a tongue-in-cheek line Crowley wrote about symbolic child sacrifice. He was actually referring to celibate magical techniques, not actual killing. This urban legend was eagerly picked up by tabloids and sensationalist Christian evangelists, further bolstering Crowley's infamy as the wickedest man. While entirely unfounded, it is a striking example of how Crowley became a veritable boogeyman in the public imagination, with rumors far outpacing reality. Another eerie tale involves Crowley's ashes. After his death in 1947, Crowley's remains were cremated. According to one persistent rumor, a devoted follower smuggled Crowley's ashes back to America and buried them under an old oak tree in New Jersey. In the following years, locals whispered that the area around that tree was cursed. No grass would grow and animals inexplicably avoided it. Some even blamed minor accidents in the town on Crowley's restless spirit. Investigators later found no evidence that the ashes were actually there. In fact, one of Crowley's American friends stated that he poured the ashes into the Hudson River. Still, the notion that Crowley's ashes carry a tangible curse lives on in occult lore. Crowley's literary critics also contributed unsettling anecdotes. William Butler Yeats, the famous poet who knew Crowley from their time in the Golden Dawn, reportedly suffered vivid nightmares about Crowley for years after their bitter feuds. Yeats once described Crowley as a man we should not speak of lest we attract his attention, suggesting he genuinely believed Crowley possessed the ability to psychically eavesdrop. Such comments coming from respected literary figures only further enhance the aura of fear and mystery surrounding Crowley. As a final, profoundly curious twist, there's a long-standing and intriguing conspiracy theory that Crowley was covertly working as a British intelligence asset, and that some of his stranger escapades were actually elaborate espionage in disguise. For instance, during World War I, Crowley lived in New York and controversially wrote propaganda articles for a German-owned magazine, shocking many by seemingly supporting the Kaiser. Years later, it emerged that Crowley had likely been secretly reporting to British officials, feeding them crucial information on German activities. He himself hinted in his autobiography that he played a double agent role to loyally help Britain. Similarly, during World War II, Crowley claimed he subtly suggested the V for Victory hand sign to Winston Churchill, framing it as a magical counter-signal to the Nazi swastika. The British government has never officially confirmed Crowley's involvement in intelligence work, so historians continue to debate these points. If true, it would fundamentally cast Crowley's entire life in a startling new light. Some of his most outrageous public behaviors might have been nothing more than a calculated cover. For example, his widespread reputation as an occult madman could have provided the perfect camouflage for meeting foreign contacts. Who, after all, would ever suspect the wickedest man in the world to be a patriotic secret agent in disguise? It is a deliciously bizarre theory that remains unproven, akin to discovering that James Bond was hiding behind the eccentric mask of a powerful wizard. Including this tantalizing tidbit, while not directly about the paranormal, intersects powerfully with Crowley's mythos by suggesting a secret double life. It invites the audience to profoundly ponder, was Crowley conning everyone about being a traitor and black magician when in fact he was loyally serving his country? Or is this merely another layer of myth-making that Crowley himself meticulously helped to promulgate, designed to make him appear even more inscrutable and mysterious? The paranormal history of Aleister Crowley is a complex tapestry, intricately woven from personal claims, meticulously documented rituals, and the widely diverging interpretations of both fervent believers and steadfast skeptics. From his early encounters within the Golden Dawn and the alleged reception of the Book of the Law from the entity Aiwass, to the controversial events at Boleskine House and the Abbey of Thelema, Crowley consistently presented himself as both a direct conduit for and a powerful manipulator of supernatural forces. The strange, bizarre, and often unusual elements of his life, ranging from automatic writing dictated by disembodied intelligences and the invocation of powerful spirits, to the tragic deaths associated with his magical communes and the persistent, unproven rumors of espionage, all contribute profoundly to his enduringly enigmatic legacy. Each anomaly, each theory, each unexplained occurrence, no matter how outlandish it may seem, becomes a crucial data point in the ongoing, unresolved investigation into his extraordinary life. The objective examination of these contrasting perspectives reveals the profound and undeniable impact Crowley had on Western esotericism. Whether one views him as a genuine prophet, a master magician, a deluded charlatan, or simply a complex individual operating on multiple, often contradictory levels, his influence remains indelible. Our goal in presenting this information has not been to endorse or to refute any specific paranormal claim, but rather to provide a comprehensive and neutral account that allows you, the viewer, to weigh the evidence, ponder the possibilities, and draw your own conclusions about one of the 20th century's most controversial and enduring figures in the history of the occult. The mystery of Aleister Crowley, the Beast 666, continues to beckon, a shadow whispering from beyond the veil. If Crowley's story has left you intrigued, unsettled, or full of questions, consider subscribing for more explorations into the mysterious and unexplained. Share your thoughts or theories in the comments, and if you found this journey compelling, a like goes a long way in helping others discover these hidden histories. Thank you for watching. Stay curious.